Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about those statement wins from teams like, I don't know why I blank, teams like Texas Tech, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Indiana. All huge wins for them, all teams that put themselves firmly in the CFP conversation going forward with quite a bit of work to do, obviously, ahead. But let's get into a couple other major outcomes from this past weekend, and some of these were not quite as close as some of the other ones that we had, but let's start with Miami. Miami was able to win this one. It was not a pretty game for Miami for the vast majority of it, really. They did not play great offense. Carson Beck definitely had his worst day, and they still won by 19 points. I think that's the big takeaway from this game. Not necessarily that Carson Beck really struggled, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but the outcome of this game is proof that what Mario Cristobal is building down there is working. Because it's not just we have to find a way to get Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo and Elijah Arroyo. We have to find a way to score 50 points. If we don't score 50 points, we're in a lot of trouble going forward. You can score 26, you can score 20. You might be able to score 17 in the game and beat a team by 7 points. You have a ridiculous defense, a ridiculous front four. Frankly, no one in college football is playing better football than Ruben Bain right now. Plain and simple, that would be my Heisman winner if we're talking about it right now. But at the end of the day, this is an incredible moment for Miami, not because it was the best football game, but because it wasn't. Because you won this one ugly. Because you won this one the way that you don't win games before, just plain and simple. And that is a huge thing for the Cristobal era. Obviously, that Florida offense has not been world beaters by any respect, but this was still a dominating performance and one that I think Miami needed to prove to themselves. They could find a way to win. They get it done. They outgained Florida 103-0 in the final 11-10 of the game. Domination for Miami late in this football game. Carson Beck, worst game of the season by far, looked a little bit like that quarterback right in the middle of the season for Georgia. I think he'll tend to figure that out. Obviously, that Florida defense has given him kind of fits the last couple of years that he's played them, so not overly surprising. Went 17 for 30, 160 and a pick, so not his best day by any respect, but tend to believe that he will find his footing. But the run game was the difference in this game. For Florida, 29 carries, 80 yards, just terrible, and DJ Lagway only gave you 61 yards on top of that and 12 of 23 passing. It continues to go poorly for that offense. But on the other side, Mark Fletcher and Charmar Brown went for 196 and two touchdowns collectively on 42 carries. Charmar Brown was the leading receiver in this game. Really fun team that's really deep at just about every single position. I don't know if there's an alpha wide receiver one on that team. Maybe Malachi Toney, maybe CJ Daniels, but at the end of the day, they have so many guys that are going to play great ball. For Mark Fletcher, Charmar Brown, and when they get Jordan Lyle going, it's going to be an incredible group up there for Miami, and we'll definitely talk about them in my top 25. Very close to the top. But at the end of the day, for Florida, I don't know. I really don't know what you do. Now, they have not fired Billy Napier as of yet. I could check my phone right now, actually, to see if they have. I don't think they have. But at the end of the day, you got to figure this thing out. I don't know where you go from here. I can't promise it's going to get better. I can't promise you're going to find a way to really figure this thing out as quickly as you want to. But at the end of the day, you got to figure it out. One way or another, you have to find a way to get this thing off the ground. It's not going to be with Billy Napier. I feel very confident in that now. What do you do from here? I don't know. But it's going to be really interesting to see what happens the rest of the way. I tend to believe that he is gone. I just don't know when it's going to be. As I can see right now, does not look like he has been fired. We will see what happens. But yeah, we will see what happens there. Apologies. Just wanted to make sure that he had not been fired. But at the end of the day, I think he's going to be let go here pretty soon. Probably, I don't want to say probably today. At some point, probably before the Texas game. If it's not then I don't know when it happens. And I don't know how much better this team gets. It's bad. And I'll just leave it at that for the time being. I don't think they need any more people piling on them. They get a bye week and then Texas, and then just a nightmare ahead. So strap in and we'll see what happens with Florida. We'll talk about it probably on Friday if anything does happen. Ole Miss dominates Tulane from start to finish. This is not the way I saw this game going by any means. Now, I knew there was a way that Ole Miss was going to be able to win this comfortably. You know, Tulane having fought for two big Power 4 wins, Ole Miss being the just more physical, bigger, more athletic team. I knew this was on the table. I didn't think it was going to be this aggressive, if I'm being totally honest. And Trinidad Chambliss, I think you have to go with him going forward. I think Austin Simmons is a really good football player. I think he's going to be a great ball player that is going to end up being a guy that is going to be able to lead you to a CFP. I don't think he's there yet. I really don't. I think he's a good passer of the football. I also think he gets a little bit uncomfortable, and against some of these SEC defenses, like a Georgia down the road or an LSU this upcoming weekend, hypothetically, he's going to have to be really, really crisp. I don't think he's there yet. I also think Trinidad Chambliss adds something to your run game that you might need in the SEC schedule, with Kejuan Lacey being a good running back, but maybe you don't want to put too much on his shoulders. But he went for 307 passing, 112 on the ground, 2 touchdowns. It's incredible. It's incredible for a kid that came from the D2 Ferris State to find his way into the SEC and just have no problem. Obviously, tough SEC play is still very much ahead of him, but at the end of the day, incredible 2 starts, and they're doing their thing over there in Oxford. As for the Ole Miss front 7, I talked about it going in that this might be the issue. They're just too athletic. They're too big. They're totally different than what they have over there at Duke or Northwestern. That's kind of the way it worked out. Cam Franklin, Will Eccles, and the entire front 7 up there is just too much for that Tulane run game. Now, Tulane is going to be okay. The problem is their conference has become a death trap, and we'll talk about that in the next segment. But the American champ is going to win this thing. It is going to be really hard for Tulane to find their way there. They still have Memphis and Army. This is a good football team. I think I'd still probably pick them to get to the American championship, but that one's become an absolute landmine the rest of the way. So we'll talk about that, obviously, as the season goes on. For Ole Miss, they got their season over the next month. Period, end of story. They got LSU next week, then Washington State, then they get a little bit of a bye, then Georgia at Georgia, at Oklahoma. You go 2-2, you're very much in the race for the CFP. You go 3-1, I would bet that you're in the CFP by the end of the year. Missouri is so impressive to me. They win a game 29-20 over South Carolina. This Missouri run game might just get them to the CFP. They have Maud Hardy going for 138. He, frankly, would probably be second in my Heisman right now, right behind Ruben Bain. 76 for Jamal Roberts, 72 for Beau Pribula. Beau Pribula didn't even need to really throw the ball in this football game. Incredible stuff from this offensive line. Incredible stuff from, I'm blanking on his name, and I apologize, the offensive coordinator over Kirby Moore. That's what I'm going for. Kirby Moore did an incredible job with this football team. Lenore Sellers in the South Carolina offense. You are where you are at this point. I don't see a world where you're going to find a way to put together really consistent, really awesome drives that don't just have a 50-yard touchdown. And the reality of this offense right now is they don't do that. They're not scoring points. So it's rough. You had 10 outside of 10 Lenore Sellers had 10 carries for negative 28 yards in this football game. Everyone else, 19 yards on 12 carries. So it wasn't like they were able to bail him out. It wasn't like the rest of the running team was able to really help out this offense. It was bad. If they don't hit 50-yard touchdowns, this offense is very anemic, and that's not going to happen against a lot of teams. It happened a couple of times on Saturday. Probably not going to happen against some of the maybe better defenses around the league, but bad. I'll just put it that way for the South Carolina offense and kind of the defense at this point. I came into the season saying South Carolina was going to be the disappointing team in the SEC, and it seems to be working out that way. I think they still have so much to look forward to in 2026 and the rest of this season. They absolutely can put something together. They get Kentucky this week. They get a bye week. Then it gets to LSU, Oklahoma, Alabama, Ole Miss, A&M. It's going to be tough. You might need to calibrate those expectations just a little bit if you're over in Columbia, South Carolina. But over in Columbia, Missouri, this is exactly where you need to be. You have UMass this upcoming weekend. You should be able to win that. Then you got a bye week, and then it's Bama. Huge, huge game. If you find a way to win that one, you got Auburn, Vandy, A&M, Oklahoma. It's far from finished. There's no doubt about that. Still some very, very tough games coming forward. I'm very much on the fence of CFP or not for Missouri right now, but that performance gives me a lot of confidence about this team moving forward. TCU gets a big-time win in the battle for the Iron Skillet over SMU. Josh Hoover did exactly what Sawyer Robertson did to SMU in week 2. 379 yards, 5 touchdowns, dominant. He was not remotely the star in this football game. Eric McAllister, 8 catches, 254 yards, 3 touchdowns. This kid was special. There was not a thing that SMU could do on the back end to stop this guy. He is going to be definitely the player of the week in the Big 12, but frankly, he should be a guy that you're watching the rest of the season, because if TCU is going to make a run in the Big 12, Eric McAllister is at the very center of that. For SMU, I knew it was going to be kind of a weird year, kind of an in between year. I think the loss of Brashard Smith was a little bit bigger of a deal than some people made it out to be. But overall, the ACC schedule starts with Syracuse, a team that in week one you would have felt great about playing. Now, a little bit sketchy over there in Syracuse. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens there. I think they can still get to 9 wins, maybe 8 or 9 wins probably. But definitely going to be a year where you're kind of just calibrating things and you're trying to figure out what's the best way to go into 2026. I still think SMU will be at least a factor in the ACC moving forward. Just how big of one is hard to know right now. For TCU, they get Arizona State Friday night. They win that game. They are firmly in the race for the Big 12 championship, probably the second team behind Texas Tech, and then still have Iowa State, Baylor, BYU. So a lot of work to do, as there is for just about every Big 12 team going forward, but TCU looks about as strong as just about anyone not named Texas Tech right now. Memphis gets a huge upset over Arkansas, and it happened again. The same thing happened again. Not exactly the same thing because they only needed the field goal this time around, but they fumbled the ball with about a minute left in the football game. They fumbled the ball when they just didn't need to. They probably could have kneeled the ball out and kicked a field goal to win it. It's just devastating. I really don't know what more to say for Arkansas. It's one of those things where I think you have a good quarterback. He made some bad decisions in this game, which absolutely did not help you by any means. You're up 28-10 early on in this football game, but then that last touchdown before halftime for Memphis really got them back into it. But it's just bad. And it's one of those things where you feel like you have a good football team. You feel like you have a team that was inches away from being 3-1 right now. Maybe undefeated right now. I think they're 2-2. So yeah, 4-0 right now. If a couple of things just don't go wrong, it's devastating. There's no two ways about that. And I don't know what you do if you're Sam Pittman. You got a really tough slate coming up. And we'll talk about it here in a second, but they got ran all over in this football game. Memphis went for 294, 7.4 yards per carry, 100 yards for both Sutton Smith and Brendan Lewis, the quarterback. Sutton Smith had the play of the day with a 64-yard touchdown to take the lead, but incredible stuff from this Memphis offense. You were always going to get beat a little bit by this Arkansas offense, but in the second half, you held them to 3 points. They did not do what they usually do. They had 2 turnovers deep in your side of the field. I believe at the Memphis 22 and the Memphis 9. Incredible stuff from this Memphis defense to adjust in the second half and get enough done. For Memphis, yet again, another team in the American that is in the CFP race. They get USF, Tulane, Tulsa, and a couple other teams. So very real team. We'll see how the American works out. We got to talk about the American maybe in its own segment here at some point because that is getting absolutely crazy. But for Arkansas, it's not going to get great. You got Notre Dame next week. I'm not going to say the full schedule because it's not pretty. You get Notre Dame coming up here pretty soon. If you win that one, at the very least, you found your footing a little bit and you get a little bit of pride. But it's just 2 ways to lose a football game that just can't happen in back-to-back weeks. And I don't know where you go if you're Arkansas right now. Hopefully you regroup and get a big-time win over Notre Dame, but who knows what happens with this football team going forward. Syracuse dominates Clemson, I think is the best way to put it. I really don't know other ways to put it. It was terrible. For the 4th game in 4 games this season for Clemson, they got outplayed, outworked, and outcoached, and I don't know how that's possible. It's not even a thing where the Clemson team is just not as talented as we thought, or they're not as good as we thought. The reality of the matter is the number of teams they've played are not nearly as talented as they are. LSU aside, they are absolutely on the same level of talent. Syracuse isn't nearly as talented. They're plenty talented, obviously. They do some really great things. They have some really great players. Same thing with Georgia Tech. You should win those games 10 times out of 10. Even just based off your talent, plain and simple. So I don't know what's happening. I really don't. And it's just one of those things where you keep looking back to the offseason and thinking, you could have patched some holes. You could have added some juice to that offense. You could have added some juice to the run game. You could have added some juice to that wide receiver room, and you didn't. And I understand why you didn't. It looked like a good team, but you have to know what you need to fill, and you didn't. For Syracuse, a ton of respect. This was a team that came off the first game of the season and then the game against UConn, and you're thinking, okay, maybe it's just a step back year for Syracuse, and maybe it still is, but this is a massive win. Losing Steve Angeli really stinks. Hate that for him. Very, very terrible moment. He is going to be out for the rest of the season, so it's going to be Ricky Collins the rest of the way. Very talented kid that came over from LSU, so I don't know if it's the same level of offensive efficiency from Syracuse going forward, but I do know that Ricky Collins is plenty plenty capable and absolutely can keep their head above water, put them in a good position moving forward. I would say more about Clemson, but I'm not sure what more there is to say. You go down by 10 before you even touch the ball. You're never within 10 points. You have 3 turnovers on downs, 2 fumbles, and INT. It was just terrible from start to finish, and it's the 4th week that I'm saying that. It was terrible from start to finish, and I don't know what to make of this football team now. So we'll see what happens. Dabo's not going anywhere, I can promise you that. We'll see what happens going forward, but it's rough. I won't get into their schedule because I don't know if it really matters going forward. For Syracuse, they're in a position where they get Duke this upcoming weekend. Going to be really, really interesting to see what they can do. But at the end of the day, this is going to be a really, really interesting team the rest of the year. There's one of those teams like a Georgia Tech, like a Louisville, like I would say Cal, but they got rolled this past weekend by San Diego State for some reason. But at the end of the day, a couple of these teams are sitting on the outside just hoping they can find a way to sneak in past a Florida State or a Miami at the end of this thing. But an incredible weekend of football, a couple of upsets there. I don't know if you can call beating Clemson an upset at this point, if I'm being totally honest. But Memphis gets a huge win to join the craziness that is the American CFP party, and TCU gets a win that probably puts them right up there with Texas Tech at the top of the Big 12. But we got more games to talk about. We got to get into a week 4 whip around right after this. We got Oregon topping Oregon State. We'll talk about Texas and Arch Manning and the debacle online that has happened with that. We'll talk about USC getting a win, Arizona State getting a massive win, and everything like that right after this, so stick with us.